Chapter 33. Your sacred sites, O Russia. I asked Anastasia, do your people often come across ringing cedars? Very, very rarely, she replied. Perhaps 2 or 3 in 1,000 years. Right now, apart from this one that has been saved, there is one more, and it can be sawed up and used for its designated purpose. What does that mean, used for its designated purpose? What is its purpose? The great intelligence of the universe, God, who created man and his environment, no doubt had the foresight to give people the opportunity to restore their lost abilities, to use the wisdom accumulated from the non-material world. This wisdom has existed right from the start, but man's ability to perceive it has been lost through sinfulness. My grandfather and great-grandfather told you about the ringing cedar and its extraordinary healing properties. What they did not explain was that its pulsations and rhythms are close to that great intelligence. If they are merged and combined, as it were, with the rhythms already present in many people, then a man who placed the palms of his hands on the warm trunk of a ringing cedar and runs his hand over it as though caressing it, thereby attains the possibility of communicating with the infinite expanse of wisdom. Such a man is capable of becoming aware of many things in the scope of his thinking at the moment of contact or thereafter. This happens in varying degree with each individual. I am telling you about the highest manifestation. But why does it happen differently? Does the cedar choose to give its power to one person and not to another? Its operation is identical in each case. Its rhythm and vibration are always the same, but some people can tune into it and feel it all to the full, while others detect just a light touch. Many others don't feel anything at all to start with, but conscious awareness will gradually come even to those without feeling. At least they have a greater possibility of feeling it. I still don't quite understand what kind of selection takes place. Vladimir, please try to read my lips. The difference is not in the power of the tree, but in the man. All right, I have found it. An example, music. You know when music is playing? Music too, after all, consists of vibration and rhythm. But some people listen to it attentively. They begin to have feelings from it. Sometimes even tears of joy and tenderness. Others listen to the same music but feel nothing or do not care about listening to it at all. The same with the cedar. Only those who are capable of feeling and understanding will hear anything much at all. And this much is something that will gradually unfold itself to them. It comes during the moments when man feels like pondering it. Women can gain the strength and wisdom of their pristine origins. They can fulfill their designated purpose and make both themselves and their chosen men happy, as well as their children they give birth to in love. And here the miracle is not in the cedar, but in human aspirations. The cedar simply assists them. It is not the major contributor to noble deeds. That's incredible. It's like some kind of tempting, beautiful legend. You do not believe me? You think what I am saying is only a legend? Why then did you make such an effort to come here? And why were you so eager to have me show you the ringing cedar? Well, I don't think it's all a legend. At first, I too didn't believe what your grandfather and great-grandfather said about the cedar. Later, after I returned home from the expedition, I read the popular scientific literature and got to know what scientists were saying about its healing properties, and I was struck by the fact that the scientists and the Bible were on the same wavelength. But I never found a hint anywhere of the cedar being used to feel a link with the great intelligence or God as you describe it. Either you did not pay close enough attention to what the scientists or the Bible were saying, or you missed the main point. Otherwise you would not be doubting my words. What could I have missed? There are only 2 references to cedars in the Bible, when God teaches how to treat people with their help, and then how to disinfect one's home. But the Bible also talks about King Solomon as one of the wisest rulers that ever lived, one revered by his people. King Solomon, you will agree, is a historical personage. He was no legend. And the Bible also says that this king built God a temple of cedar, and a house for himself beside it, also made of cedar. And in order to get the cedar, he hired more than 30,000 workers to bring it from another country, and to get the cedars cut down. Solomon asked another king named Hiram to give him people skilled in felling timber. Getting this cedar cost Solomon 20 cities of his kingdom. Think, why did the wisest of all rulers need to go to such expense and build his temple and house out of a material which was less sturdy than what he had on hand already? Why? You can find the answer to that too in the Bible, where it says, "And it came to pass, when the priests were come out of the holy place, when the cloud filled the house of the Lord, so that the priests could not stand to minister because of the cloud, for the glory of the Lord had filled the house with the Lord." You can find indirect proofs of this in the works of your prominent scientists. That's great, something, I think, I can believe in. It means the cedar will reveal many secrets to people. Show me the ringing cedar that can be sawed up. I'll bring it to a city with easy access for people from all over the world wishing to touch it. Where will you find a city on the earth where the inhabitants will not simply desecrate this sacred cedar, but actually ensure its protection and provide a suitable exhibition space and access for visitors? I'll try to find one. Tell me, why have you concluded that it's going to be such a difficult task? People's consciousness today is too bound up with the programs of the technocratic world. They're becoming biological robots. What kind of biological robots? The technocratic world is structured in a way that man keeps on inventing all sorts of mechanical devices and social orders supposedly to make his life easier. But in fact, any saving of labour is an illusion. Man himself is becoming a robot of the technocratic world. He never has enough time to contemplate the essence of being, or listen to what another is saying, and no time either to reflect on his own destiny. He is literally a programmed robot. Here you are seeing everything with your own eyes, and hearing it with your own eyes, and you still find it hard to believe. Anastasia, with me, it's a different story. I cannot call myself a strong believer. I believe, in general, but probably not the same way other people do. In our world right now, there are a lot of people who truly do believe. Many read the Bible, they will grasp it immediately. They see how much the Bible talks about the cedar. They will grasp it immediately. They see how much the Bible talks about the cedar. They will believe and take good care of your little piece of cedar. There are different kinds of beliefs, Vladimir. It often happens that a man will hold in his hands the Koran, or the Bible, or another book containing the wisdom of the ages, and say what he believes, and even try to teach others, whereas in fact he is simply attempting, as it were, to make a deal with God. Look here, I believe in you. Remember that in case anything happens. What then is belief or faith? I inquired. How should it be expressed? In one's way of life, in one's perception of the world, in the understanding of one's essence and designated purpose, in one's corresponding behaviour and relationship to the environment, in one's thinking. So just believing is not enough. Just believing is not enough. Imagine an army. All the soldiers, down to the last one, believe in their commander, but they do not go into battle. They have such strong faith in him that they trust he will win in any case. So the soldiers sit back and watch as their commander goes up alone against the enemy forces. They sit there in a state of frenzy and call out, "Go, go, go! We believe in you. We know you can do it." That's no help, Anastasia. You didn't really make a good analogy. Those kind of absurdities simply don't happen. Those kind of absurdities do happen in real life, Vladimir. Then give me an example from the concrete realities of our life, and not something made up. Fine. There's a city in Russia called Galenzik. It has a noble purpose, to be a place where people can go to relax from their daily grind, a place to meditate and touch sacred sites. There are many sacred sites in and around this city, which are more significant than those found in Jerusalem, more significant than the pyramids of Egypt. This city can be one of the richest cities in the world, richer than Jerusalem or Rome, but the city is dying. It is a resort town. All its houses and hotels are becoming empty and decaying. The materialistic consciousness of the local authorities prevents them from seeing the treasures which are capable of making the city flourish. When they talk about the city, they emphasize the sea, the artificial treatment facilities available, and the fact that the local hotel rooms are equipped with bedside tables and fridges. They do not even mention the sacred sites. They know little about them themselves, and they do not want. Their priorities lie elsewhere. There are many people living in this city who call themselves believers, people of many different denominations. Some of them actively engage in proselytizing. What faith do they proselytize? With their attitude to their surroundings, they have been and still are violating the very commandments contained in their sacred books. In the Bible, for instance, where it says, "Love thy neighbour as thyself." But you have to know your neighbour before you can love him. You cannot love whom you do not know. But they, the one who call themselves believers, do not know their neighbours, or even their forebears who lived in that sacred land, and left them the inexhaustible treasure of the sacred sites as their legacy. Our ancestors have carried with them over the millennia waves of wisdom and the light of their own soul. Many people call themselves believers, yet do not notice what is sacred around them, the sacred sites which have been left them by their ancestors to help them. What kind of sacred sites could possibly be found in a city like that? You see, Vladimir, near the city of Galenzik could be found growing the Lebanese cedar mentioned so many times in the Bible. And this living, direct creation of God, talked about so much even before Christ Jesus coming to earth, is located right next to this city. It is only 100 years old, but is still a stripling. It is still but a stripling, though already very beautiful and sturdy. It has grown there because it was planted by a worthy man. He was a writer named Korolenko. Thanks to his erstwhile popularity, the cedar has been protected with a surrounding hedge. But today the house where he lived is in a state of decay, and people are not paying attention to the tree he planted. And what about the believers? Many of the people in the city who call themselves believers pay no attention either to the tree or to the other great sacred sites of their forebears. They are destroying them, and the city is dying. That means God's punishing them for some kind of vengeance, eh? God is good. He's never vengeful. But what can he do when his creations are ignored? That's amazing. Can such a tree really exist? I must look into that. It exists, and there are many other sacred sites around the city, but people treat them from a technocratic point of view, like the pyramids of the wise pharaohs. What? How do you know about the existence of Egyptian pyramids? Thanks to the generations of my forebears, the ability has been preserved within me to communicate with the dimension where thoughts and wisdom resides. This communication gives one the opportunity to learn anything one might wish to know, anything that captures one's interest. Hold on a moment, let me test you. Answer me. Do you know the secrets of the Egyptian pyramids? I do. Just as I know that those who investigated those pyramids were constantly working from a material standpoint. They were basically interested in how they were constructed, the dimensions and relations of the sides to each other, what treasures were hidden inside, what things were to be found there. They considered people living at the time of the pyramids, were built to be superstitious. They regarded the pyramids only as a means of preserving the pharaoh's valuables, their bodies, their glory. Thus they distanced themselves from what was fundamental, from what was consciously designed. I don't understand you, Anastasia. What conscious design were they distancing themselves from? Anastasia didn't speak for some time, staring, it seemed, somewhere off into infinity, and then she began telling her remarkable story. You see, Vladimir, way back in ancient times, people living on the earth had the capacity to use wisdom and intelligence far surpassing the abilities of modern man. People at the time of the Earth's pristine origins enjoyed ready access to all the information of the entire database of the universe. This information filling the universe was created by the great intelligence God, with contributions both from Him and from people themselves, their thoughts. It is so superb that it is capable of answering any question unobtrusively. The answer would appear instantaneously in the subconscious of the man asking the question. And what did it give these people? These people needed no spaceships for travelling to other planets. All they had to do was wish for it, and they could see what was happening there. These people needed no television, telephone, or communication wires ensnaring the earth. Not even literacy. Since all the information you derive from books, they were able to obtain instantaneously by other means. These people needed no industries producing medicines or drugs. They could get all the best remedies possible simply by a gentle wave of the hand, since whatever they needed is available in nature. These people needed none of your modern transportation devices. They did not need cars or food processing complexes for everything was supplied to them. They knew that a change in climatic conditions in one part of the earth was a signal to them to move to another part, so that the part they were leaving might refresh itself. They had an understanding of the universe along with their own planet. They were thinkers and knew their designated purpose. They worked to bring the planet Earth to perfection. They had no equals in the universe. In terms of intelligence, they were second only to the great intelligence of the universe, or God. Approximately 10,000 years ago, in the human civilization that then populated what is now Europe, Asia, the northern part of Africa, and the Caucasus, individuals rose in whom the link with the intelligence of the universe was partially or wholly deadened. This point marks the beginning of mankind's movement toward a disaster of global proportions. The exact nature of the disaster is immaterial, ecological, nuclear, or bacteriological, either as forecast by scientists or foretold allegorically by ancient religions. Hold on there, Anastasia. I don't at all see how the appearance of such invalids can be related to a global disaster. Your choice of that modern term, invalids, is very apt. Yes, they were invalids, handicapped people. Now when someone is deprived of sight, what do they need? Someone to guide them. And someone deprived of hearing? A hearing apparatus. And someone with no arms or legs? Prostheses. But there was something much greater that they lacked. They did not have a link with to the intelligence of the universe. Hence, the loss of the knowledge which would help improve the Earth and govern it. Imagine what would happen if the crew of a supermodern spaceship suddenly lost 90% of their mental capacity. Not comprehending anything, they might start taking apart the panelling and building a fire in the cabin, or pull instruments out of the consoles to use for toys or decorations. Well, these people can be compared exactly to a demented crew like that. And these were the handicapped invalids who first invented the stone axe, then the spear, and it is their thoughts that progressed over time to the invention of nuclear warheads. It is their thoughts that even today continue with incredible stubbornness to tear down already perfect creations and substitute their own primitive artifacts. Their descendants started inventing more and more, and in doing so kept tearing apart the supermodern natural mechanisms of the earth and creating all sorts of artificial social structures. Then people started fighting with each other. These mechanisms, these machines, were capable of existing all by themselves, like natural ones. Not only could they not produce themselves, but they could not restore themselves after a breakdown, as a tree can, for example. And then they, the technocrats, required a vast army of workers to service these mechanisms, virtually transforming a segment of the general populace into biological robots. These biological robots, lacking as they do any individual capacity to learn the truth, very easily lend themselves to manipulation. For example, they were all too easily injected through artificial information media with the program "We Must Build Communism." Symbols were created for it, including lapel pins and flags of a certain colour. Then later, through these same media, the program "Communism is Bad" was inculcated in another segment of the populace, and other symbols and colours were brought to the fore. And then these two groups with different programming end up hating each other, right to the point of physical annihilation. But this all began 10,000 years ago, at the time of a significant increase in the number of people deprived of a great link to the great intelligence. It didn't say a great link, it just said a link to the great intelligence. Indeed, you could even call them demented, since there was not a single living creature capable of polluting the earth the way they did. In those far-off times, a few people were still left who had free access to the wisdom of the universe. They hoped that when mankind reached the point that the polluted air made it difficult to breathe, and the water became dangerous to drink, and all its artificially created life systems, support systems, technological and social, proved themselves too awkward, and more often only led to disastrous imbalances, mankind would start having second thoughts. People standing on the edge of an abyss will start thinking about what being is all about. They will start pondering the meaning of their existence and purpose. Then many of them will desire to understand the truth of their pristine origins, and this is possible, but only under the absolute condition that the abilities inherent in man's pristine origins be restored. Few of the people who lived 10,000 years ago still possess these abilities. It was basically those heading up social groups, leaders of tribes. They began, or rather at their behest people began, to construct special facilities made of heavy stone slabs. These enclosed an interior chamber about 1.5 by 2 meters in area and 2 meters in height, sometimes more, sometimes less. The slabs were placed at a slight angle, leaning toward the centre at the top. Occasionally, these chambers would be hewn out of a single monolith. Other chambers might be hidden underground and covered over by mounds of earth. On one of the walls of the chamber, a cone-shaped opening was cut into the slab, approximately 30 centimeters in diameter. and covered with a specially fitted stone plug. Into these tomb chambers would go people who had not lost the ability to communicate with the wisdom of the universe. Those still alive, and even those who might be born thousands of years hence, would be able to go to them and obtain answers to any questions that were of interest to man. This required sitting beside the chamber and meditating. Sometimes the answer would come right away, sometimes after a delay, but it would definitely come, since these structures and those that retreated into them served as an information receiver. Through them it was easier to communicate with the great intelligence of the universe. These stone structures are the prototype of the Egyptian pyramids, only the pyramids do not constitute nearly as powerful a receiver, even though they are far greater in size. Their essence and function, however, is pretty much the same. The pharaohs who were buried in the Egyptian pyramids were also thinkers, and at least partially preserved the abilities inherent in man's pristine origins. But in order to obtain an answer to a question using the pyramids, those still living had to come to the pyramid not individually but in large numbers. They had to stand along each of the four sides and direct their physical and mental gaze upward as though skimming over the pyramid's oblique sides right to its top. There at the top, people's gazes and thoughts focused on a single point, consequently forming a channel facilitating contact with the mind of the universe. Even today it is possible to do the same thing and obtain a desired answer. At the focal point of everyone's mental gaze, an energy forms, an energy not unlike radiation. If a measuring device were placed at the top of the pyramid, right at the focal point, it would record the intensity of this energy. The people standing at the base too would feel strange sensations. Oh, if it were not for the sinful pride of people today, the prevailing public opinion, the false perception that past civilizations were less advanced, people today would then be able to find out the real purpose of the pyramids. With all the attention modern researchers have paid to how they were built, they still have not been able to figure this out. And it is all so simple. In constructing the pyramids, apart from physical strength and various pieces of equipment, they always used mental energy to reduce the force of gravitation. Whole groups of people with this kind of an ability would assist the builders. There are people alive today who are able to move small objects with their will. But of immeasurably greater significance than the pyramids in terms of contact with the mind of the universe were the smaller stone structures which preceded them. Why, Anastasia? I asked. Of the way they were constructed, their shape. Because of the way they were constructed, their shape. Because, Vladimir, living people retreated there to die, and their death was a most unusual one. They went into eternal meditation. What do you mean, living people? What for? To create for their descendants the possibility of bringing back the power of their pristine origins. For an elderly person, as a rule, one of the wise elders or founders of a tribe, sensing his end was near, would ask his relatives and family to place him in a stone chamber. If he were considered worthy, they would grant his request. They would push away the heavy massive slab covering the top of the chamber. He would go into the stone chamber and the slab would be pushed back into place. Inside, the man would be completely isolated from the external material world. His eyes would see nothing, his ears would hear nothing. Such complete isolation, the impossibility of even entertaining a thought about going back, but not yet having crossed over into the next world. The deactivation of the usual organs of feeling, sight and hearing would open up the opportunity for full communication with the mind of the universe, and the comprehension of many phenomena, as well as of many of the actions of earth dwellers. Most important of all, they would be able to subsequently transmit what they had discovered to those still alive, as well as to succeeding generations. Today you would call an approximation of such a state of mind meditation, but that is merely child's play in comparison with meditation in eternity. Afterward, people would come to this stone chamber, pull out the plug covering the opening, and begin thinking, menting with the thoughts lingering in the chamber. The spirit of wisdom was always there. But, Anastasia, by what means can you prove the existence of such structures, of those of us living today, let alone the fact that people went into them for eternal meditation? I can, that is why I am telling you. Then how? It is very simple. After all, these chambers made of stone, they still exist today. Today you call them dolmens. You can see them, touch them, and you can verify everything I have told you. What? Where? Can you pinpoint their location? Yes, I can. In Russia, for example, in the Caucasus Mountains, not far from the cities you now call Gelendzhik, Torps, Novorossiysk, and Sochi. I can verify that. I'll make a special trip there. I still can't believe such things exist. I'll definitely check to see. Do verify by all means. The local inhabitants know about them, but they do not pay any attention to them. Many dolmens have already been plundered. People do not understand their true purpose. They do not know about the possibilities they afford for contact with the wisdom of the universe. Those who have entered into eternal meditation can never be re-embodied into anything material. They have sacrificed eternity for the sake of their descendants. And now it turns out their knowledge and opportunities have gone begging. This has caused them great sorrow and anguish. As for proof that in the past living people went into these dolmens to die, this may be confirmed by the position of the skeletal bones discovered in them. Some were found in a reclining position, others sitting in a corner or semi-reclining, leaning against one of the stone slabs. This fact has been attested by people today. It has been described by your scientists, but they still have not attributed any special significance to it. No serious studies of the dolmens have been undertaken. The dolmens are being laid waste by the local inhabitants. Some of them have been using their stone slabs for construction of new buildings. Anastasia sorrowfully lowered her head and fell silent. I promised her. I will tell them what you have said. I'll explain everything to them so they won't go on plundering and laying waste. They won't mock them anymore. They simply didn't know. Do you think you will manage to convince them? I'll try. I'll go to these places and try to explain. I don't quite know how at the moment. I'll find these dolmens, pay my respects to them, and explain it all to the people. That would be good. Then, if you are going to those places, people, please pay your respects to the dolmen in which my foremother died. Astonishing. How do you know that your foremother lived in these places and how she died? Anastasia replied, How could one not know? Vladimir, how one's ancestors lived and what they did. How could one not be aware of their desires and aspirations? My ancient foremother certainly deserves to be remembered. All the mothers in my family since then have learnt of her wisdom, and she continues to help me today. My foremother was a woman who had perfect knowledge of how to inculcate in her child, through breastfeeding, the ability to communicate with the mind of the universe. Even back in her time, people were starting to ignore the significance of this, just as people ignore it today. In breastfeeding an infant, the mother should never allow herself to be distracted by random thoughts, but concentrate all her attention on her child. My foremother knew what to think about and how, and consequently wanted to share her knowledge with everyone. She was not yet that old when she started asking the leader about being placed in the dolmen. This was because the leader was getting old and she knew his successor would not accede to her request. Women were rarely permitted to go into the dolmen. The old leader revered my foremother and had great respect for her knowledge, and he gave his consent. only he could not compel any menfolk to push back the dolmen's heavy stone slab and then reseal it once my foremother had entered. Consequently, this task had to be carried out by women and women alone. And nobody comes to visit my foremother's dolmen anymore. People are not interested in what she knows. And she so desperately wanted to share it with everybody. She wanted children to be happy and a joy to their parents. Anastasia, if you wish, I shall go visit the dolmen and ask her how to breastfeed infants. Ask her what to think along this line and how. Just tell me where it's located. Fine, I shall tell you. Only you will not be able to comprehend her response. You are not a nursing mother. After all, you do not know what a breastfeeding mother feels. Only women, nursing mothers, are in a position to understand. Just go to the dolmen, go up to it and touch it. Think some good thought about my grandfather, about my foremother. She will like that. For some time, neither of us said a word. I was amazed at how detailed her explanations were regarding the exact location of the dolmens. Enough information for me to subsequently verify, and I was not about to raise any further doubts about their existence. And there's some pictures of dolmens, a map, some more dolmens, picture of the Cedar of Lebanon, picture of women outside the one of the dolmens, picture of Father Theodoret's church, the one and only by a single line Christ picture, and the Dachnik holiday day, people celebrating that, and then a picture of Vladimir Megre. I did ask her, however, to show me some proof of the possibility of contact with the invisible and still incomprehensible to me wisdom of the universe, to which Anastasia responded, Vladimir, if you keep on doubting everything I say, any proof I have to offer will seem incomprehensible and unconvincing to you, and I shall have to spend a great deal of time explaining. Don't be offended, Anastasia. It's just that your unusual lifestyle as a recluse. How can you call me a recluse when I have the opportunity to communicate not only with everyone and everything on earth, but with significantly more? So many on earth are surrounded by utterly lonely people just like themselves. These are real hermit recluses. It's not that frightening to be alone. It's much more frightening when one is lonely even when surrounded by people. But still, I persisted, if one of our prominent scientists, let's say, could talk about that dimension, the one where, as you say, thoughts produced by human civilizations reside, people would be more inclined to believe than just on your say-so. That's the way people are today. They look to formal science as an authority. There are such scientists. I have seen their thoughts. I cannot tell you their names, but no doubt they are renowned scholars by your standards. They have the capacity for prolific thought. You can hunt down the proofs you need when you get back and compare them with everything I have said. Upon arriving in the Caucasus, I located the dolmens in the mountains near Galenzi. I took some colour photos of them. They knew about the dolmens at the local history museum, only they didn't attach any particular significance to them. I also managed to find the dolmen where Anastasia's foremother was buried. Paying my respects, I laid flowers on the moss-covered stone portal. As I looked at the dolmens, I realised that there was visible and tangible proof of Anastasia's words. By that time, I had read the account from 1 Kings in the Bible about King Solomon and his relationship to the Cedars of Lebanon. Not being much of a scholar myself, I wasn't about to leaf through a whole lot of scientific works trying to find confirmation of Anastasia's words. But by extraordinary coincidences, this young recluse from the remote Siberian taiga seemed to be able to confirm from a distance the truth of everything she said, and in the language of modern science. People took it upon themselves to bring or send to me scientific studies dealing with the existence of the mind of the universe. At the beginning of Book 1, at the beginning of the book, I cited the conclusions of two academicians, Vlail Kaznachev, member of the Russian Academy of Medical Sciences and director of the Institute of Clinical and Experimental Medicine, and Anatoly Akimov of the International Institute of Theoretical and Applied Physics in the Russian Academy of Natural Sciences, published in the May 1996 issue of Wonders and Adventures. I've been writing this chapter about the sacred sites of Gelendzhik right in the city itself. The text has been keyboarded into the computer by an employee of the Friendship Sanatorium, Marina Davidovna Slabkina. Prior to its publication in the book, it was gone over by employees of the sanatorium, and something interesting has happened. On the 26th of November 1996 at 10:30 in the morning, Moscow time, an event occurred which did not have any obvious claim to significance, although I am certain that it will prove to be of planetary proportions. A group of women were making their way toward one of the dolmens in the mountains near the settlement of Shada in the Gelendzhik district. They were all employees of the Druzhya Sanatorium. V. Larionova, N. Gabinova, L. Zvaganisova, T. Zaitseva, T. Kuruskaya, A. Tarasova, L. Romanova, and M. Slabkina. In contrast to the tourists that sometimes visit these places to admire their natural beauty and gawk at this lonely mountain dolmen, these people, possibly for the first time in a millennium, came to the dolmen for the specific purpose of honouring the memory of their ancient forebear, to honour the memory of a person who lived more than 10,000 years ago, a wise leader of his people who, at his own initiative, was sealed in this stone crypt, alive so that over the millennia he could share the wisdom of the universe with his descendants. It is difficult to say for just how many millennia his efforts went begging. Traces of our own era's atrocities are seared into the ancient slabs in the form of modern graffiti and the forcibly enlarged aperture in the dolmen's portal. Visitors to the dolmen, at least over the past century, have brought little about its significance, about the person buried here, his wisdom, his desire and aspiration to sacrifice his life for the living. This is all eloquently attested in the number of pre-revolutionary as well as more recent monographs I have seen. Scientists, researchers and archaeologists have been more interested in the dimensions of the dolmen itself, amazed and eager to determine how the multi-ton slabs were prepared and put in place. And now I looked at the women standing by the dolmen with the flowers they had brought to lay at the portal, and thought to myself, how many centuries or even millennia have passed since you last received flowers, O illustrious ancestor? What does your soul feel now? What is happening this very moment in the astral world? Have you, our distant and yet so close forebears, taken these flowers as the first sign that your efforts were not in vain? And among people today, your descendants, there is an aspiration toward living one's life with greater conscious awareness. These are but the first flowers. No doubt there will be more and more. But the first ones are the most desirable, and you will be helping those who are now living attain the wisdom of the universe and the conscious awareness of being. You are our distant forebears. Participants in this visit to the dolmen included the sanitary inspector of the Gelendzhik Health Service, E.I. Pokrovsky. He had been invited by Valentina Larionova, in her capacity as local tour guide and museum curator, to accompany them and measure the dolmen's radioactivity. Ms. Larionova told me that once on an excursion she had led to this dolmen, a tourist Miss told me that once on an excursion she had led to this dolmen, a tourist had brought along a Geiger counter, which had showed a significant level of radiation. This individual later took her aside so as not to alarm the other tourists, showed her the counter, and told her about the presence of radioactivity at the dolmen. This time, the health service inspector had brought along a fairly accurate radiation meter in its own special case. He began measuring radiation levels even before we got close to the dolmen, and continued his readings right up to the dolmen itself and even inside. While Ms. Larionova was giving her talk to the group of women, I was seized by the fear that now this medical inspector would announce the results of his measurements for all to hear, and as this would not just be a tourist's observation, but an official conclusion, people might stop coming to visit the dolmen once they learnt of the elevated radiation levels. Anastasia told me that this radiation-like energy could come and go. It was controllable and could have a beneficial effect on man. But how would we, people of the modern world, look upon the opinions of this, let's admit, not very typical woman, in contrast with the affirmations of modern science and facts established by modern scientific equipment, especially concerning radiation, which man is so fearful of today? Oh God, I thought, poor Anastasia. She wanted so much, after all, for people to take a different attitude, a more thoughtful attitude toward these ancient, extraordinary burial places of our ancestors. And now there would be an official pronouncement. Even in the best case, it would mean no more visitors to the dolmens. In the worst case, they might be destroyed altogether. People wouldn't even use them any longer for construction as they had done before. But if this mind of the universe really exists, if Anastasia can use it so freely, then they'd better come up with something at least. Pokrovsky approached the group of employees standing by the dolmen and announced the readings on the meter. They were most extraordinary. I felt overwhelmed, first with amazement and then with joy. According to the readings, the closer one got to the dolmen, the more Earth's background radiation decreased. This was all the more remarkable since, on its way to the dolmen, our group had passed through areas of elevated radioactivity. One would have expected the people standing at the dolmen, their clothing, shoes, etc., to have retained traces of this radiation, but in spite of this, the measuring device still showed decreased levels. It was as though an invisible someone had said, "Do not be afraid of us, people. We are your distant forebears. We wish you well. Take our knowledge, children." And all at once I realised, Anastasia, this phenomenon must be attributable directly to her. Yes, definitely to her. Even though she was thousands of kilometres away, she had drawn an invisible line across the millennia, linking those living today with an ancient civilization, thereby causing a surge in people's consciousness of an aspiration toward good. Even if it were just among a small group of people, it was still a beginning, and it was something absolutely real, since here in front of me was a real dolmen, and here were real and tangible women and real flowers which they had brought. According to scientific literature, dolmens are to be found near Torps, Sochi and Novorossiysk, as well as in England, Turkey, North Africa and India. This points to the existence of an ancient civilization with a single culture, whose members could communicate over vast distances. As Anastasia's information reaches more and more people, their attitude toward whatever other dolmens have been preserved will no doubt change. This is evidenced by the reaction of the people of Galenze. Indeed, the world's first excursion to a dolmen following Anastasia's amazing revelations about them took place at Galenze, led by Valentina Larionova, the luckiest and happiest woman alive, as she describes herself. And here was a woman with 30 years' experience as a tour guide and a member of the Galenze City Council to boot. But that's not all. Under Ms. Larionova's guidance, a group of local historians began comparing already known facts They spoke with long-term residents of the area and read biographies of saints, all of which enabled them to confirm the existence of the Galensic environs of the sacred sites Anastasia had spoken of. These were unique sacred sites of Russia, most of which were not even mentioned in a single tourist brochure. They included the Lebanese cedar, St. Nina's mountain, a monastery, and sacred hand springs. People are healed there tie a cloth ribbon around a tree. In the Galensic area, a church is now being restored. A branch of the Trinity Sergiev monastery is under construction. I observed all this myself. Look at all these sacred sites in just one small corner of Russia. Springs of healing waters, and here Russians are traipsing off to the ends of the earth to worship gods. How many still forgotten sacred sites are waiting to be discovered in other parts, and who will discover them? I've done what I can. It's a pittance, of course, but at last it has given me some hope that Anastasia will show me our son. So, armed with romps, toys, and baby food, I set off for the Siberian taiga to once again see Anastasia and meet my son. To be continued.